And welcome everyone to It's Last Call. Last call at the alcohol only on the lastcallpodcast.com. And join me here from the Ringside Reporter. This man is embedded right now in Las Vegas, figuring out what's going on, who's going to win, what the odds are, and the whole aspect of this mega fight, which is Canelo versus Crawford this Saturday only on pay-per-view. And we're happy to have him on to talk everything about the fight. I give you once again from the Ringside Reporter. I give you Joe Habeeb. So Joe, let's start off here with Canelo Crawford itself. Why is this a big fight? I mean, for those who don't know, and like, what is the significance of a fight, and why is this a fight that a lot of people are excited about?
Well, still think Canelo is the face of boxing, regardless if, he's lost a step or, you know, his level of opposition. He still does put butts in the seats. Right now, everyone does know him. I think he is a crossover star. And I think because now that he speaks English, I think that's helped him a lot too. And Crawford, I think they're doing a great job promoting him. I think he's been doing a great job promoting himself. He's been on podcasts. He's done a lot of interviews. So I think he's done a good job with the media. And I see a major shift in him since that Spence fight. And he's a little bit more engaging now than he's ever been before. And, I just think overall, Dana White and Netflix, WWE, TKO, everybody involved here. I think there's been a lot of cross promotion for this fight, and I think they did a great job overall with it. You're seeing TikTok videos, YouTube videos. I think a lot of people are behind this, and now being on Netflix, where you have a platform that has 300 million subscribers, I believe this is going to be the most watched fight in the history of the sport. That's what I'm predicting. I hope I'm right, and I feel as though I may be right here.
So, what should the expectations be? That's the big question because Turkey is going. Hey, we want an action-packed fight. I want knockouts. He wants action. That's not Terence Crawford and Canelo Alvarez. They're not blood and guts warriors. They're tactical fighters. They know how to break people down. Neither of them is going to just take damage for the sake of taking damage. So, going into this fight, like, what should people expect in terms of like, the Sheik, Turkey Al Hameen or Al Sheik is promising, hey, we're gonna have big action, and I'm jumping like you and Manny Montreal, like, yeah, let's pause the brakes here. This is, guys who that's not their jam.
Yeah. Both guys do have a tendency sometimes to start slow in fights, but I do think Terence Crawford is kind of the wild card in this fight. I think with Canelo, what you see is what you get. People are saying, and there's been people in the camp, from what I've heard, saying that they are going to go for the knockout. But Canelo Alvarez is a counterpuncher. Terence Crawford can be a counterpuncher, but Canelo Alvarez, by nature, his first instinct is to always be a counterpuncher. Terence Crawford can be whatever's required on the night, depending upon the opponent. We've seen this guy, or at least I've seen this guy win in so many different ways. I've seen him change up tactics in the fight, change up plan A, plan B, plan C. I've seen him go through the gears in fights, whereas Canelo Alvarez, as great as he is, and I don't, people think I demean him when I critique him, but he fights in one gear and one gear only. And Terence Crawford can create openings. He forces openings, right? Where Canelo Alvarez waits for openings. He'll change level, do a head and shoulder feint. He is trying to get you to react to the feint. But if you don't react to the feint, he's not going to press the issue against you. With Terence Crawford, he'll throw the feint, but a lot of times he'll stick the jab in your face. It'll be a pesky jab, but he'll also step in hard behind the jab. He'll throw a couple flicks out there, and then he'll step in with a hard one. He'll hook off that jab. So he'll force you to react to whatever he's doing. And Canelo, more often than not, will get most guys to react to what he's doing, but it's just based off of that little level change, that head and shoulder feint. He's so good at that he will get the desired result more often than not. But when he doesn't get that result, he's not going to force the action. He's not that seek and destroy guy. And I know Max Kellerman saying, oh, well, he's turned into that seek and destroy guy. I don't believe he has. I don't think he was a seek and destroy guy against Berlanga or Munguia or Jamal Charlo. He will step to you, but he'll never go deep in that pocket and swarm you and be that pressure fighter like Triple G was. He's not Roberto Duran. He's not a guy like Hagler who will stalk you. He is a counterpuncher first by nature. And even though Crawford does start off slow, I thought he started off quick in the Spence fight. I thought he started off a little. I thought he was very active early on with his jab against Madrimov. So he will do whatever is required. And where Canelo is more stubborn and set in his ways, he's like, "This is my style, and it's good enough." And it's almost like a shooter who's missing his shot, but he just keeps shooting instead of dishing it off to a guy who may have a hotter hand.
Yeah.
He's saying to himself, eventually this shot is going to go down. Canelo Alvarez is the same way. Now people will say, "Oh, well, what about that second Golovkin fight?" I still don't think he was the stalker in that fight. I thought he met Triple G in the center of the ring, and instead of backing up like he did in the first fight, he met him in the center of the ring and he kind of punched with him. But even with that, I still think Triple G landed a ton of jabs in that fight, and I still think Triple G edged that fight out. I don't have a problem with people who think Canelo won it, but I don't think it was a clear-cut victory for Canelo, even with the difference in approach in that fight. I still think he lost the fight. A lot of people still think he lost that fight. But again, I have no problem with him getting the decision there. But I just think offensively, there's more layers to Terence Crawford here than there is to Canelo, in my opinion.
In regards to that, and I'm not criticizing you because I think you're spot on. Does Canelo have to do that? I mean, because he'll look at this and it's like, all right, it's like Vladimir Klitschko, it's like Tom Brady, it's like Peyton Manning. This is our style. It's worked for years. We're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're not going to do anything, like Tom Brady wasn't going to run bootlegs and do sidearm throws. It was, I've done this, this will work. I know it works. Why change? So if you're Canelo and he hears this and he's going to go, oh, well, why should I change? It's worked with everybody except for two men. Dmitry Bivol, who's a hell of a lot bigger than Terence Crawford, and Floyd Mayweather, who you talk to Canelo's people, he was weight drained, he wasn't ready, and the moment got too big. That's changed since then. So if you're Canelo, do you have to do anything differently in this fight?
It's not if, it's will. I don't think he may, even if he tries to do something different, Chris, he's gonna be like a fish out of water because he's been fighting a certain way for so long. And if he lets the public goad him into fighting outside of himself and being something he's not, then that's going to be a problem for him because that'll be, that'll fall right into Terence Crawford's hands. So will he? Can he? He may try to, but I don't think it'll be in his favor to do so if he decides to be aggressive. Because here's a guy, in my opinion, who never had the quickest feet in the world, right? And now I believe those feet are getting even slower. And what I'm starting to see and what I have saw over these last 6 fights is that upper body is starting to get ahead of that lower body, meaning those feet are lagging behind. It's funny when you hear these old adages in boxing. The first thing to go in a fighter is his legs, but the last thing to go is the power. But to me, that's like a paradox, right? Because where does the power come from? When I used to go to gyms and I did my own types of training with boxing and boxers and stuff, first thing they would work on with you is your feet. They'd throw you before you even started hitting the heavy bags, hitting the mitts, going in the ring and sparring. They wanted you in a mirror and they wanted your feet and upper body to work together in unison, making sure that elbow's not going over the front knee, making sure you're not telegraphing or lunging in with your shots and being off balance. And what I'm seeing now is that one punch at a time that Canelo is throwing, it's because his upper body is ahead of his lower body. That brain wants to do things that those legs are not doing and not responding to what that brain is asking those legs to do at this stage. And that's why he's throwing the one shot at a time. And people are saying that, he's got these feints, and he's great with the feints, great with timing. I get all that, but the big thing is that level change. He'll do that head and shoulder feint, do that dip, that level change, trying to sell that left hook to the body, and he leaves his opponent guessing. Is he going to stay there and shoot that left hook to the body, or is he going to come upstairs? Well, if you've looked recently, that left hook is going to the head all the time now. There's no guessing anymore. Like, opponents are kind of seeing where that punch is going to go. But again, because you got a guy like Berlanga, you got a guy like Munguia, those guys aren't the quickest of foot either. They're not on the same level skill-wise as Crawford is. So they may see that punch coming, but even with them seeing it coming, they're able to maybe react to it at the last minute, but it's still getting through. Where Terence Crawford may see that punch coming, and he may be way more further ahead of the curve than those other guys were, and he can react to it better than they did. And the reason why I believe you're not seeing the knockouts anymore is Canelo can still punch, but guys I think are seeing it coming and they're able to brace for it. It's not always just the size, because people are talking about Bivol like he's this giant light heavyweight. Caleb Smith was bigger than Bivol. You look at somebody like Caleb Plant. He's about the same size, if not bigger than Bivol. Billy Joe Saunders is about the same size as Bivol. So for me, the guys that give Canelo the most problems are the guys that have that pot shot element to their game. Pot shotters. He has a problem with guys who have quick feet, who can pot shot, who have a real good, educated jab, and who can really vary up that jab. When I go back and I look at that Mayweather fight, he couldn't get away from that jab. Canelo does have, good feints, and he has good upper body movement, but he has to have his feet underneath him before he starts, using that upper body movement, bending at the waist, changing the levels. When he's on the outside, he's not moving much. Like when you look at a guy like Madrimov, that's perpetual motion. Shout out to Breadman, because he articulated a little bit different than me. He said that he feints off the bounce. So what does that mean? I call it perpetual motion, meaning he's always moving, bopping his head side to side, front to back, shifting the shoulders. There's herky-jerky movement, right? And he'll throw a feint off that. He'll throw a foot feint off that. He'll throw a head and shoulder feint off that. He'll throw 2, 3 feints off that, where Canelo needs to kind of get those feet underneath him. Then he does the level change. Then he may do the head and shoulder feint. So I said before the Madrimov fight that fight was going to go the distance. I don't think anybody from 154 to 160 knocks out Madrimov. I thought the Crawford fight was competitive, but I thought Crawford made the adjustments. I thought early on Crawford was keeping it on the outside, and Madrimov was getting in a battle of the lead hands, trying to, he was lead hand dominance early in the fight. But then Madrimov shifted in the middle rounds, and then he started doubling and tripling up the feints, and he wasn't relying as much on the jab. He was going to the lead right hand, and a few of them did get through. And I thought Crawford rolled a good amount of them, but a few of them did land flush. But this whole notion that Crawford gets hit a lot, I've never seen Crawford get pieced up in a fight. Who's landing combinations against Crawford with regularity? So I'm not saying he's impenetrable. I'm not saying he's Pernell Whitaker. I'm not saying he's Floyd Mayweather. But this notion that he gets hit a lot, I'm not ready to buy that either. Canelo does have great defense, but I do think when there's space and at range, I think he's very susceptible to the jab. Mayweather hit him with a lot of jabs. Erislandy Lara was pegging him with a lot of jabs. Golovkin landed a ton of jabs both fights. Dmitry Bivol, we saw really have some success with the jab. And even Kovalev, before he got stopped, he was really doing some really good work from the outside, particularly with the jab against Canelo. So Crawford with those long arms, I think Crawford right now arguably has the best jab in boxing. I would say something, people are going to probably kill me for this. I would put Crawford's jab right up there with Mayweather's jab. I think this Crawford's got an incredible jab. And like what Lara was doing off that jab, which is a punch you don't see a lot from the southpaw, Lara was successfully surprising Canelo by hooking off that jab. And if you go and look at some of Crawford's fights, you go and you look at that Cal Brook fight, he really hurt Cal Brook with that right hook because it came off the jab. He didn't pull that right hand all the way back. He left it half cocked, and he can really turn it over and generate power off that right jab. He was knocked Spence down with it a couple times and hurt him with it. So I'm telling people right now, Crawford is going to be working that jab in overtime here, and people are going to be surprised with how much it lands in this fight and the sneaky punch like what Lara was doing against Canelo with that right hook off the jab. I think Crawford's going to be able to do that a lot as well in this fight.
So we're going a bit fast here. Let's go first to Canelo Alvarez, which is a big question everybody wants to know with him is he still motivated? I mean, when you are, owning thoroughbreds, owning gas stations, doing movies, like boxing for him is no longer his only passion. He is a guy who's doing X, Y, and Z. So if you are Alvarez, how hungry are you going forward? Because he already has everything.
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. Canelo Alvarez always looks like he's in phenomenal shape. I'm sure he trains very, very hard. But again, he's got 20 years in, right? And he's had 2 knee surgeries, had a wrist surgery. He's got a lot of miles on the clock. And unlike Terence Crawford, when Terence Crawford was at welterweight, had 100% knockout ratio. So he wasn't putting in a lot of rounds at welterweight. Most recently, he hasn't been putting in a lot of rounds. A lot of Canelo's fights as of late have gone the distance. So that in itself is more miles on the odometer. So I just think subconsciously, when you're doing something like boxing and you're putting your body through all that punishment, I think subconsciously self-preservation kicks in. And at some point you say to yourself, and this is just me, and who am I to say this, but I've talked to fighters before, and you kind of get the sense where they're at by how they answer questions, how they talk to you in their conversations. And a lot of times boxers, when they answer questions and they talk to you, it seems like they're trying to convince themselves. And at this point, I have to question whether or not that desire is there. He may believe it's there. He may try to summon that desire. One thing that's never going to go away is the pride. So he's always going to give it all in the fights. But when you look at these fights, not only these last 6 fights, but a lot of fights in Canelo's career, so I don't think he's really pushed himself. Like his style, you can say his style is what it is because it's more of a cerebral style. But I think he fights at the pace he fights at because I think that's how his body operates. I don't think he's would ever be a high volume guy. I think he approaches fights with, I'm going to do the least amount possible to win these rounds. I've seen him fight that way in a lot of fights in his career where he's just doing enough. He's saying to himself, because of the stubbornness, I don't have I'm not going to chase this guy around the ring. I'm not going to throw a lot of punches here. I believe if I land a good shot, that I can change and turn this fight. So I've just never really seen him go over the top and push himself physically in a fight. And when something's not working, I don't really see him approach a fight when he's fallen behind with a sense of urgency. He still stays in that one gear where I've seen Crawford change gears in a fight. Where with Sean Porter, that was kind of like a sparring session. They were friends. Maybe he didn't approach that fight the same way he would other fights. And it didn't. But as soon as Bomac said, "Hey man, they got you behind in this fight," then that killer instinct kicked in, and he switched the gear and he got him out of there. Even with Madrimov, he won the last 3 rounds of that fight when Bomac said to him, "Hey, look, this may be closer than you think." So what did he do? He started doubling and tripling up the jab. He started stepping in hard, mixing in a hard jab. He was going to the body, and he was stepping to him with authority in those last 3 rounds. And in those last 3 rounds, Madrimov was starting to get hurt. He was sucking wind. And again, I'm a hypocrite here because I always tell people you can't score facial damage. But if you look at the left side of Madrimov's face, it looked like someone dropped a bucket of bricks on it. The whole side of his face was red. And you're not going to tell me that jab was not doing serious damage to Madrimov's face. He was getting hit with that a lot in that fight, and it was hurting him. So again, knowing and seeing that Canelo gets hit with a lot of jabs, and I don't think he moves as much his head like Madrimov, particularly when there's at range and when there's space. I think that jab is going to be there for Crawford. And the whole notion that he has to really stun, buzz, buckle, wobble Canelo to win this fight, I think he's going to get his attention. I think he will be able to land the jab. And the punches that do the most damage are the ones that the fighter doesn't see. And I don't think he's going to see that right hook coming. I think that's going to be a problem for him in this fight. So he could get Canelo's attention and do some damage in this fight. Even though I don't think he'll stop him, he could do some damage. He could freeze him a little bit, catch him off guard with some of these surprise shots, in my opinion.
Here's the one of the big advantages Canelo has: money. And I say that because he's taking his fight camp seriously. He brought in Boots Ennis to be his sparring partner. Yep. That costs money. That means you're going to fly in a guy who is a world champion to be your sparring partner, do everything to mimic Crawford. Like, how big is that for Canelo? But hey, I need top quality sparring partners. Okay, I'll find the best fighter in the world, and I will pay him to be my sparring partner. Hey, I need state of the art equipment. I need all this. Well, fine, I can just write a check and cash it. Like, for Canelo, how much does it help that all this money allows him to bring in guys like Boots Ennis, like Breadman, to sort of be a second person to watch over this, former Olympians, train at the best places, so that everything is tailor-made for his camp.
Yeah. Again, it looks like he's pulling out all the stops for this fight. And I do believe that he is taking it seriously. But I go back to the muscle memory here, Chris. You could have an intention in preparation, but at the end of the day, like the great Customato said, people who are born round, they don't die square. So he could have the intention and the motivation and the game plan, and maybe even try to change things up in this fight. But you are who you are. He is a counterpuncher first by nature. He is not a guy that likes to push the action, right? So it's all going to come down to styles make fights, the old cliche. He can want to do certain things, But if instinctively his body just reverts back to what he knows, that may not matter. And again, I could be way off here and I could be wrong here, but I have to go with empirical data, what I've seen, not only in the last 6 fights, but over the course of the career. Even that one punch knockout with Amir Khan. Amir Khan was stationary for a bit too long. Canelo changed levels, did the dip, and then all it took was for Amir Khan to drop his hands, and then that right hand came right over the top, because when Canelo changed levels and did the dip, Amir Khan thought the body shot was coming, and Canelo just popped up real quick, and he delivered the right hand straight down the pike. A little bit looped it a little bit over the top, but it was pretty much straight, and he got through. Because what happened? Amir Khan bit the feint. He bit the level change. Now, what happens if that doesn't happen in this fight? What happens if Canelo maybe lands a big shot, and maybe it does buzz Crawford? But is that one big shot going to be enough? Now, it could be. One punch could turn this fight. But at 168, when you look, 12 fights at 168, right? Only 3 knockouts, and 2 knocked out Rocky Fielding. He knocked out Caleb Plant. And who's the other guy he knocked out? Trying to think. There's another one he knocked out. Rocky Fielding, Caleb Plant.
Sergey Kovalev.
Well, that's at 170. Oh, Yildirim. I'm talking about 168. So it's Yildirim, right? Rocky Fielding and Caleb Plant. And that, Caleb Plant one was a while ago, but Caleb Plant again was winning rounds. But what does Caleb Plant have a problem with? Stamina. He slows down greatly in fights, and that's when he's hittable when he gets tired. Yildirim, he's been knocked out several times. Chris Eubank Jr. knocked him out. So again, when you have a guy like Crawford who's quick, can move, I don't know if one shot at a time is going to get it done. So you could say that he hasn't knocked a lot of these guys out because he's been fighting bigger men. But again, the bigger men that he fought, they've been knocked out subsequently in their next fight. So is it more or less these guys just being bigger, or is it more or less that one shot at a time? Not coming off as quick as it used to. Maybe people being able to see the punch coming and bracing themselves at the last minute, even though they're still getting knocked down, and they're still seeing it at the last minute. Like the surprise element to that punch, like was there in the Amir Khan fight. That surprise element may not be there anymore. We'll have to see. Now, the notion that Crawford is just going to turn into a Torre Gotti and stand there and slug with Canelo Alvarez, I don't think that's going to happen. And the notion that Canelo Alvarez is going to turn into Roberto Duran and be that swarming pressure fighter, or Marvin Hagler and be that swarming pressure fighter, or turn into Golovkin, he may try to do that, but I just don't think he'll be successful at it, because that's not instinctively what his body has been doing and trained to do over the years. So it's going to be very interesting how this fight plays out, because people are saying that what if Crawford can't hurt him, and can Crawford take his punch? And all that really boils down to is the size. Those are things that are tied into Canelo's size advantage, right? And I'm not going to be like these other people.
Well, that leads me to the second point. And
go ahead.
We look at Bud Crawford, and he's a great fighter at 140, 135, 147. This is now 168, and we saw with Madrimov, he got a little bit not hurt, but he got stung a couple times, because all of a sudden he realized, this is a much bigger man. And for all those people go, he can block with his arms. I'll go ask Dimitri Bivol, ask Callum Smith, ask Caleb Plant. They'll tell you getting
Well,
punched in the arm by Canelo hurts. It's still a guy who is a big physical guy, and he will land those left hooks right to your arm. And after a while, you're like, I don't like this too much. So I know Bud's put on weight. He looks fantastic, but for him, how much is it like? Oh crap! I'm going up in weight, so my foot speed might be hindered a bit just because I now have this extra weight, and I'm not going to be the guy who can just knock somebody out like I did at 147, 140 with one punch. That's now probably gone. Rare do we see a guy who, maybe like a Michael Morzone I can even think of, who went from two weight classes up and still could knock people out with one punch.
yeah. Well, the way I look at this is I'm not going to be that guy that says, "Oh, Crawford's bigger. These guys are the same size." Canelo's bigger, and in most fights, there's always a bigger guy. Like Beterbiev was bigger than Bivol, right? Even Spence was probably bigger than Crawford, right? But the one word that I have an issue with is that adverb, much bigger. I don't think that the size advantage Canelo has is as great as everyone is pumping it up to be. I think Canelo is probably 6 or 7 pounds bigger than Terence Crawford, right? Now, is that an insurmountable weight advantage? No. If you go back, and obviously Canelo turned pro at 15, so he was younger. He turned pro at 139 pounds, right? 5 years later, he was still fighting in 2010 at 147. In 2010, Bud Crawford was fighting at 140, right? And even when Bud won the title at 135, he fought Breedis Prescott at 140. So to me, Bud was always a guy fighting in a weight class below what he really was. Now, does that mean he's a 168 pounder? No. I don't think it's ridiculous to say that Bud couldn't fight at 160. Even Madrimov in the amateurs fought at 165 pounds. Sean Porter as an amateur fought at 165 pounds. So, Chris, because you have these day before weigh-ins, 36-hour before weigh-ins, like you see these guys stay at weight classes for a long time, and a lot of these guys, I don't like to use this term because I think it's kind of a ridiculous term, but they do like to have that weight advantage. They call them weight bullies. So Terence Crawford was going to move up to 154 anyways after the Spence fight. And he was saying that 147 pounds was not an easy cut for him. So, yes, without a doubt, Canelo Alvarez has a bigger frame, greater bone density. He's a bigger man. But is he a lot bigger? Is it a ridiculous, insurmountable size advantage?
No,
And
and I get that part, but it's still though it's carrying the power, as you said. Usually, like we saw when I'm going back to the old school for a lot of the people here who have not watched fights on YouTube and don't know that boxing at one point was bigger than just Netflix. It was on national TV. Roberto Duran was a monster at 140, 147, even at 135.
Mhm.
And then he goes up to 154. And what happens? Oh, Thomas the Hitman Hearns destroys him in 2 rounds. He goes up to even 168, loses to Vinny Pazienza.
Sure.
He was the same size as him, but the power doesn't carry. All of a sudden, these are bigger men who they hit a little bit harder because they're coming down in weight. You and I both know that just because you step on a scale and goes 168, we've seen enough fighters, in both boxing and MMA, who they know how to just shred that weight, and then next night out, they're 20 pounds heavier, and you're going, oh my God, I'm taking on a friggin' light heavyweight cruiserweight.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Is
again,
Crawford going to be used to that now? All of a sudden, realizing, crap, Canelo's probably rehydrated up to 175, 185, and he
I
hits hard, and my punches don't hit as hard against him.
yeah. Well, that those are all great questions. They're legitimate questions. And again, there's more questions without a doubt for Terence Crawford in this fight than there are for Canelo Alvarez. I do think, and most people do think, he's slowed down. Everybody realizes that yes, he's not a high volume guy, that he is a counterpuncher. Everyone knows these things, but everyone also knows that he still does pack a punch. But is that one punch as hard as it used to be? Is it as explosive? Are people seeing it coming? So obviously, yeah, there's a ton more questions for Terence Crawford to answer, and he's going to have to answer those questions tomorrow night. But when you get, here's another thing. Andre Ward said something really, really poignant when he was talking about his career and kind of making a parallel to this fight. When he was moving up to light heavyweight and he was working with Mackie Shilstone, and he said, yeah, I'm moving up to light heavyweight. And he goes, no, you're not. He goes, you're just not cutting down to super middleweight. So you're just cutting less. Now, again, I don't believe Terence Crawford is a full-fledged super middleweight. I don't think this would be a division that he would compete in. So could he fight at 160? Sure. Absolutely. I don't have like Irislandi Lara is the same size as Terence Crawford, in my opinion. You could even argue Terence Crawford may be a tad bit more muscular than him. And where is Irislandi fight right now? Fights at middleweight, right? Look at Derevyanchenko. He's not bigger than Terence Crawford. He was fight. So to me, in all honesty, Chris, this is a super middleweight versus a middleweight, in my opinion. That's how I see it. Now, can a great middleweight beat a great super middleweight? Sure, why not? Why not? So I think that the size is not going to play that much. Now, your question is very relevant. You could be right and I could be wrong, but I do think because Crawford's going to see these shots coming, is he going to get buzzed? Could he get hurt? Absolutely. But he could also see these shots coming and maybe roll away from some of them. Maybe make Canelo reach with these shots where again, like I said, the upper body's kind of getting ahead of that lower body now, and Canelo hasn't always had those legs up underneath them, and that sometimes takes a little sting out of the shots. So I'm betting that Crawford will be able to weather the storm, and I think he'll be able to handle the one shot at a time that's going to be coming at him. And I think I do think he'll have some answers for Canelo Alvarez, in my opinion. The question is, will Canelo Alvarez have answers for Crawford? That's the question I have.
Here's the other question that is probably in the back of Crawford's mind. He doesn't want to admit it, but it's in the back of his mind.
Mm-hmm.
Can he win a close decision against Canelo? Because you talked to Golovkin, you talked to Austin Trout, you talked to probably even Miguel Cotto. They'll go, no. When Vegas loves Canelo, outside of the Bivol fight, anytime it's been a close fight, he gets a decision. And it'll probably be a very heavy pro Canelo crowd. You know how it goes. Judges, they say we don't get swayed by crowds. I call shenanigans. They do. Every time he lands a punch, every time he throws a punch, it looks like it's landing. They'll go bananas. They will make it a factor. It's you almost fighting two men. You're fighting Canelo and you're fighting the crowd, which influences the judges. So if you're Crawford, how much do you worry? Like, I really got to dominate this fight, or I really need to knock out Canelo, because if it goes to the judges, they might screw me 10 ways from Tuesday.
Oh, he can say whatever he wants. There's no question that is in the back of his mind. If we're talking about it, if the press is talking about it, if the people who are broadcasting the fight are talking about it, and we're constantly asking that question before every Canelo fight, which is really no fault of his own. I mean, he's not scoring his own fights, but regardless, there is a subconscious bias, in my opinion, towards the A-side fighter. If there's a quiet round, right? Even though judges will say whatever they want, I do think there's always that tendency to give that quiet round to the name A-side fighter. So what Crawford has to do, regardless if he knocks Canelo out or not, he has to make, and I said this on the show Sunday, he has to make every second, every moment of the round, of the fight, purposeful. So if there is a quiet round, if there's dead space in the round, dead time in the round, he's got to constantly be touching Canelo. You don't have to step to him. You don't have to land something hard. Just touch him. Touch him with that jab. Keep popping him with that jab. Do not allow time to go by without something happening, right? I'm not saying you got to turn into William Zepeda, right? If you want, throw some soft jabs out there, mix in some hard jabs. Even in the early moments where you're trying to feel him out and kind of read what's coming at you, you have to be very careful that you don't allow too much time to go by without you doing something, because the inclination and the tendency will be there to just give it to Canelo in a quiet round. So I guess the game plan, in my opinion, would to not, I'm not saying every round has to be World War III, but you can't allow these rounds to be too quiet and too uneventful, because if that's the case, he has to control the pace here. He has to set the pace. He has to control it. And in the second half of the fight, I do believe he's going to pick it up. I do believe he's going to pick it up. And that's where the fight gets interesting. Listen, we could have a chess match. These are two cerebral fighters. Neither one of these guys are volume guys, but Crawford does have a bit of a higher output and does throw and land more punches than Canelo. But where this fight really has to change and where Crawford really has to turn this fight up is in round 5, is in round 6. And if you go back to the Bivol fight, Chris, watch those first 4 rounds. They were quiet. And what happened, Chris? All 3 judges gave those first 4 rounds to Canelo, even though I believe Bivol won at least 2 of them, right? Because what was Bivol doing in the beginning? He was pot shotting from the outside. And once he felt Canelo started to slow down a little bit, once he started getting a feel for what Canelo was doing, then he started stepping in with the flurries, right? So that's why that fight was so close, because in those quiet moments, the tendency and the inclination of these judges is going to be to give it to Canelo. And Canelo, while most people scored that fight 117, 111, or 118, 118 or 110, they only gave Canelo 2 or 3 rounds in that fight. That's what most people did. The judges gave him 5 rounds. And why did that happen, Chris? It's because those first 4 rounds were quiet and they gave him to Canelo by default. So you can't allow these rounds to be too quiet. But I know that was a long-winded answer for you, Chris, but to sum it up in a nutshell, absolutely that's in the back of his mind. And if it's not, it damn well should be.
Last topic. TKO Boxing. It's you see right there is Turkey Al Sheikh. It's Dana White. It's Nick Khan. It is Ari Emanuel. They're all into this here. And Netflix is hopping on board. Is this going to work for them? Because you have these great businessmen, but let's face it, Nick Khan is mostly WWE. But they're used to scripting everything. That's what even Vince McMahon, before he got kicked out of a company, said. In WWE, we can control the narrative. In fighting, once the guy loses, you're screwed. Dana, he's always been. He can underpay guys. It's only 5 rounds instead of 12. He's used to dealing with more action. How much is riding on all this for all of them, where they're promising a lot? I mean, this is a big, sexy fight. They're promising action. they're making it accessible. It's on Netflix. It's on Tudum. It's on, they're doing a full court press. And at the end of the day, if this is a stinker fight, how much of this is sort of like, all right, we need to go back to the drawing board here in TKO boxing?
I think what Turkey Al Sheikh did, because I believe Dana White is a great promoter. I would argue he is the best promoter in combat sports. I know I get a lot of flack for saying that.
Oh, he is. You can love him or hate him, but he is. But it's different in MMA where it's like, okay, you're not asking people to stick for. I mean, MMA crowds, it's like, okay, 3 rounds, 5 rounds, we can do. That's only half an hour. Boxing, it's like, oh, an hour. So when he can't just tell fighters, oh, I'm not gonna give you bonus money if you don't, fight harder. Or if there's no action, I'll rip you apart. If he does that to Canelo and Crawford, they're just gonna look at him and give him a side eye, go, yeah, whatever. We're getting our millions. Go bleep yourself.
Well, again, here's what I tell people, because everyone brings up the class action lawsuit, which they should. That's going to be a stain and a blemish on the UFC forever. Just like when a fighter tests positive for PEDs, regardless if it's by beef or if it was unintended or whatever the case may be, it's going to stay. So they're always going to be able to. Sean Zattel, he pulled it out of his back pocket yesterday, and he did something that a lot of people wouldn't have done. And whether you agree or disagree with him, I know Sean Zattel. If he said it, he meant it, right? He's not going to pander to anyone. I have a great deal of respect for Sean Zattel. But so yeah, that's always going to be there. But this is what I tell people, Chris. The UFC is affiliated with TKO, which is a publicly traded company. They have shareholders to answer to now, and there's a board of directors, and the Fertittas are no longer there. And the Fertittas, with all due respect, they're very prominent in Las Vegas, and they had that a lot of casino business and all that stuff going on in Vegas. They had a real stronghold on the municipality and just the whole infrastructure there in Vegas. They were big players, and they had a lot of influence. And even with that, they've been sued before by unions. So they've always had issues with labor and labor unions. But they're gone now, Chris. Now this is a publicly traded company. As I said, they have to answer to shareholders, and they have to answer to a board of directors. So I don't think you're going to have a problem with any of that funny stuff or any issues with pay moving forward. And I would also argue, if you take the lowest paid fighter on a UFC show and you match that guy's salary up with the lowest paid fighter on a boxing show, I would argue that the lowest paid fighter on a UFC show makes more money than the lowest paid boxer. I think boxing has always been a top heavy sport. And I'm not saying UFC is not top heavy too, but Dana, I agree with Dana. It is the money is spread out more evenly than it is in boxing. So will this work is the question. I believe, and Dana White pretty much revealed this, and this was something that I suspected all along. Just like WWE has that, I believe it's called Tough Enough, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, where they have that kind of farm league, if you will, and the winner of that goes to the next level, which is WWE. You're on the cards and you're televised, whatever. And just like UFC has the Ultimate Fighter, I think this is going to be that same type of model in boxing. And then Ariel Helwani is like, well, he never said that before. Well, he didn't really say what TKO was going to be. He was very non-committal in describing what it was going to be. But I tell people this: all those fighters that PBC signed and Top Rank signed, that are on shows, that are on non-televised shows, right? All these fighters that are going to be available, that don't have a home right now, they're not signed to anybody, they're gonna gravitate to this, right? Because this is going to be their shot. All the guys that never had that opportunity to sign with a big promoter, and even if they did sign to a big promoter, if they were kept off television, they're on way down below the undercard, they're going to have an opportunity to make it to the big time. So when Ariel Helwani says, "Oh, I don't," and then when Dana answered the question, and when he was being interviewed, I think he was being interviewed by Max or even I think Shannon Sharp. I think he said it in both those interviews. When he was asked, so what if the guys that are in this TKO promotion, what if they do become big stars, right? What if they do make it, right? And then he said, well, I'm gonna let Turkey take care of that. And then Ariel's like, well, what does that mean? What does that mean in Tough Enough? What does that mean in The Ultimate Fighter? Basically, this TKO is going to be the litmus test for the lower mid-level guys, where this is going to be something that they have to go through and graduate towards the big pay-per-view cards, if you will, or even just the big headliners. So this is going to be almost like a farm system, in my opinion, Chris. And that doesn't mean that the fights aren't going to be good, because these guys are going to have so much motivation because they're fighting for their shots. Whereas a lot of the boxers, once they make it, right, they're fighting, they're not incentivized to take risk because they're already getting big money fights. Now, all these fights are on pay-per-view in order to pay these guys the purses that they want. Whereas that's not going to be the case with these guys. These are guys that never got exposure before, Chris. These are guys that they feel, and maybe they're right or maybe they're wrong, they feel they've never got that opportunity. How many fighters out there are probably really good fighters, maybe even great fighters, but they just never got that chance. They never got that opportunity. Well, this is going to be for them. And then when they do reach a certain level, then yes, maybe Dana will pass them on to Turkey, and Turkey will put them in those high-profile fights. Maybe they will become high-profile fighters. So I think this is going to be a trial for that type of fighter to see if he can graduate to that next level. So I don't have a problem with it. And then I know a lot of people are saying, well, what about?
I guess like here's and this is more of we're not going to find this out in this fight, but this is an overarching one. But I think both boxing and even UFC has to worry about. They're no longer making stars, and you could argue that the worst thing that happened in both sports was the super rise of the NFL. Hey, why should I do MMA or boxing when I can go to college now, play football, and NIL money? I can get anywhere between a couple million to a couple 100,000. Why should I bash my brains in when I can play the CFL even to make more money? I mean, and look, I get it. It's boxing and the UFC and MMA. You're getting most of these kids. You're getting guys who are too small for football, too small for hockey, basketball. So they're good little athletes, but they're smaller. If you're TKO Boxing, how do you fix this? Because you're starting to look around. It's like, wow, Crawford and Canelo are both getting up there. They might retire within the next year or so. Then Joshua's talking retirement. Then Fury. You're no longer getting the Olympics aren't producing the next big it star. Like, what do they do going forward to go like, okay, we need to get better athletes. We need to get people into these sports, or else we're not gonna. This won't be successful because if there are no stars, nobody's gonna give a crap and nobody's gonna watch.
Well, Chris, to me, right? It always comes down to the product. And if you build it, the old saying goes, they will come. So because they're going to be on Paramount Plus, they're going to be on CBS, and it's going to be free, basically. I know people would have to pay for a subscription, but they're going to get, number one, they're going to get a lot of exposure, probably more exposure than boxing has normally gotten. And boxing has gotten a lot of exposure, but too many of these fights, Chris, as you know, have been put behind a paywall. So this is not going to be put behind the paywall, right? And even the UFC, 75% of their shows are not being put behind the paywall, only 25%. Or in stark contrast, PBC has 80% of their shows behind the paywall. But I think that it all comes down to the product. and it all comes down to how you sell it. And I think they have a great platform to sell it. And if they do a lot of shows and they keep putting these guys out there. And here's another thing, Chris, that I think is phenomenal. And I think this is really being overlooked: the cross promotion. If you have the WWE, UFC, right? And Paramount has football now. So if they start doing advertisements during football, college football games, shows, uh, NFL, whatever, if they just blanket all the other sports with promotion, then that's going to help too. But at the end of the day, you're exactly right, Chris. The fights have to be entertaining, and if they're not, that's going to be a problem. But I'll be honest with you. I'm optimistic. I'm always I was very optimistic at the beginning of PBC. I was a staunch defender of PBC in the beginning, and where they lost me was when they started putting guys on the shelf and when they started putting all these fights behind the paywall. So I give you the benefit of the doubt until you give me reason not to. Right? I love capitalism. I love the free market. I love when Dana White says there's no barrier to entry. And that's why, to me, when I hear all the negativity towards this, it reminds me of PBC in the beginning when there was a lot of negativity behind them, right? And the same things were being said, right? But with this, like I said, this is a major company, TKO, Chris. This is a company that is worth, I believe, the market cap value. I want to say it's in between 45 and $50 million market cap value. $billion. So this is a big company. And you don't get that. I know people don't love, like Paulie Malignaggi doesn't like to hear this because his response would be, well, how did they get that big? They're screwing the fighters, blah, 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 blah. Whatever. But they have to know somewhat, and I think you may agree with this, they have to know what they're doing to some degree if they're able to get that big. And here's another thing, Chris. When you have that WWE channel with 110 million subscribers, and you're simulcasting press conferences for this fight, and you're doing promotion on that channel for this fight between Canelo and Crawford, that's a lot of eyeballs, Chris. So I'm excited for this. I'm optimistic about it, and I think it'll be fine. I do think it'll be fine.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, it's Crawford versus Canelo this Saturday on Netflix. And well, we have this man here broke it down for you and explained everything as simple and as elegant as you can expect. I give you, once again, from the Ringside Reporter, it's Joe Habeeb. So, Joe, once again, where can fans check out you? Where is your YouTube channel, the website, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook? Where can fans check out your stuff?
Well, the YouTube channel is Ringside Reporter Live. I'm there with my co-host Eric Loader every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. We do our weekly podcast. I do periodic shows during the week on the same YouTube channel as well. I'm on Twitter at jhabib1. I'm on Facebook at Joe Habeeb. I'm on Instagram at Joe Habeeb, and I'm on TikTok at Joe Habeeb. So feel free to follow me on any one of those social media platforms.
Joe Habeeb, ladies and gentlemen, once again, always on and pleasure to have you on the show. We come back, a lot more going on here, only on it's Last Call. Last Call of the Alcohol, only on the lastcallpodcast.com.